Hello, everyone. I'm David Faber. Thank you for joining us today for Milken's Global Conference live stream. As I said, I'm David Faber from CNBC. I'm looking forward to what is a great lineup of people to help us discuss leadership and corporate culture. It's a topic, of course, that resonates particularly in light of what have been these last tumultuous 7 months or so. Joining me today, Kevin Johnson, the president and CEO of Starbucks, Ajay Banga, the CEO of Mastercard, and Judith McKenna, the president and CEO of Walmart International. Thanks to all of you for joining us for our conversation for the next hour or so. And let's get right into it. Kevin, this week, and I think we all lose track of time, but I think October 14th was this week, you put out a new memo on Starbucks' role and responsibility in advancing racial and social equity. It's not as though you have not been, and the corporation has not been outspoken on this topic for some time. I'm curious as to why you chose to put another memo out and what the purpose of it was and what it is you're trying to accomplish by sending this out to your employees.
Well, David, I guess I would just start by sort of framing the fact that Starbucks is grounded in a mission that is all around the human experience, and really a mission grounded in humanity and a purpose that goes far beyond the pursuit of profit. And when we think about the journey that we've been on as a company, I think about the things that we do for our Starbucks partners, the things that we do to create a warm, welcoming environment in our stores, an inclusive work environment, throughout Starbucks. And much of that has to do with inclusion and diversity. Now, we've been on a journey. We've been on a journey for many years, continuing to work to be a better company, to create a more inclusive work environment, to embrace diversity in ways that help us create that great experience for our customers and help us attract the talent to build this great company. And so, if we look at what's happened over the last several months with numerous instances of racial injustice and inequity, and certainly I believe we have a role and responsibility as a company to really stand up against racial and injustice and inequity at every opportunity we have. So much of what we've done is over the last several months sort of looked at our journey, where we're at, and decided, look, there's more we need to do. There's more we want to do. And we really decided there's three principles that guide us. The first is being intentional about what we're doing. The second is being transparent with all of our data and all of our goals. And the third is holding ourselves accountable. So the announcements we made this week, I think, are just an extension of the journey we've been on, but the announcements were material. We announced and we shared our EEO1 data. We showed, the mix of the percent of BIPOC population in every part of our company, whether it's in retail, whether it's in our roasting plants and supply chain, or in our corporate headquarters. We outlined our initiatives around inclusion and what we're doing. We set some goals around diversity. And we even announced that we're now linking executive compensation to the achievement of those inclusion and diversity goals. And so this was something we've been talking with our Starbucks partners about. It's something that builds on the journey we've been on. And we think it's our role and responsibility to take these steps. And I think in doing so, it makes us a better company. And hopefully it inspires others to do more to promote racial equity and justice, both within their companies and in our society.
Kevin, it's interesting as a company, you have been doing and speaking about these things for some time, prior even to these last 6 or 7 months, to the death of George Floyd. But so many things have been accelerated, including corporations responding to this. When you say, though, that Starbucks, you're going to hold people accountable, you mentioned compensation. Give us a sense here in terms of the metrics you're looking at, how you measure things, and how accountability really is going to actually flow through the organization to make sure this is not just a lot more words that end up not really resulting in action.
Yeah, David, basically the model we put together has a set of activities that we look for every senior vice president and above in our company to engage in to create a more inclusive work environment. And every one senior VP and above gets evaluated on those actions and how well they engage and participate. For example, we launched a mentorship program where every one of our executives, senior vice president and above, will be mentoring, one or multiple Starbucks partners who are earlier in their career, people of color, to help them grow, to help them develop, and to help them achieve their aspirations. So mentorship is a part of that. So there's a set of metrics that we look at on engagement in inclusion, in activities related to creating a more inclusive work environment. On diversity, we then basically set targets. You know, we said, look, at these levels, we expect to have 30% or more BIPOC population over the next 3 years that we're measuring and we're very transparent about, and a percentage of the executive bonuses are determined based on how well that executive engages in inclusion activities and how well we collectively as a leadership team fulfill these commitments to achieve these goals around diversity. So it's a combination of things that we're measuring, but percentage of bonus and even some variability in our long-term incentives are linked to achieving these goals.
Judith, you run Walmart International, obviously. We all know Walmart as one of, if not still, the largest single private domestic employer in the United States. But I wonder, is this a worldwide effort? What do you hear from, and how do you communicate with your workforce outside the U.S. about these issues? Is it of importance to them? Has it taken on the sort of singular importance it seems to have in the United States?
Yeah, so diversity and inclusion wherever we operate is critical. So outside of the US, we operate across 26 different markets. We have 800,000 associates around the world, and this is a matter that's really close to their hearts. In the US, clearly there are very specific issues for the US, which George Floyd's murder on the 25th of May became a moment in time that galvanized more action, which, although everybody had been on a journey, I think has created a new momentum. And Walmart US are doing some phenomenal work in this area with the Center for Racial Equity, as well as the shared value networks that are being created across healthcare, education, criminal justice, and bringing all of that together. What we've tried to do around the world is to say, what particular issues does each market have? The injustices for Black and African American people in the US are not the same as those, for example, in South Africa, where we have a very active program looking for Black South Africans coming into the organization. We mentor, we bring people through, and actually we're increasing our metrics really quite significantly. I think one of the things that Kevin said that is important is transparency, and we moved recently to diversity reports that are not published once a year. They're actually going to be published twice a year. They don't just cover the US, they cover every market in which we operate. And the other area into which we're leaning heavily, because it is common around the world, is also gender diversity, because that is something that we have been passionate about and continue to be passionate about for the future. So no, the issues of inclusion are not just one for the US. They are worldwide. They are different by each market that you operate on. And the real challenge for people is to understand the nuances of each market and make actions that are appropriate for them. And that is one of the challenges, as my two colleagues here face, of being international businesses as well.
Yeah, I wonder, Judith, Doug McMillon, your CEO, had also been doing things, again, prior to the pandemic, prior to the death of George Floyd, that were advancing on this front. But how much have these efforts been accelerated by current events?
I think, crises are like wars. They put history on fast forward. And I think that is what you are seeing here. We thought we were doing enough, and we knew there was more to do. But I think it was an accelerator. And as tragic as the events were and the following events that happened, that is a good thing that we all stopped and we looked and said, what more is there we can do? And we deliberately went out. We said, what can we do differently? And if you look at the shared value networks and what they do, and I take one such as education, we were already doing a lot of work in the education field. In the US, we employ 1.4 million associates, so our scale is extraordinary. And we were already offering college degrees for $1 a day. We were already offering academy training for more than 1 million of our associates in leadership and how to work. But what we did is we put a different lens on that and said, is the diversity element of that big enough? Are we actually hiring enough people? Is our populations that we're training, are they in the right percentages, and does that look right? So I think we took what we were already doing and we hit the accelerator button. But we also understood, and Doug has talked about this a lot, which is don't jump into action necessarily till you truly understand what problem it is you are trying to solve. So in the US, we're putting our entire population of officers through Racial Equity Institute training to make sure everybody fundamentally understands the problems that we all face. That way, people can bring solutions whichever part of the business they work in and make sure that they're actually going to be effective this time. Because it's not through lack of will, but I think it's lack of effectiveness that we haven't actually made more progress than we have.
Yeah, Ajay, talk to me a bit about lack of effectiveness. You know, if the cynics out there would say it's great to hear our corporate leaders discuss these kinds of issues, present them in the way they are, try and measure them, but they still end up thinking, well, will anything really change? You know, give me your perspective, of course, as a longtime business leader as well, of a very large global organization.
Well, I think first of all, I think what both of them are talking about are all admirable moves. And the fact that Kevin and his team are putting not just transparency, but even compensation onto the table explains to you and shows you how serious they are about making something happen. The fact is that this thing about effectiveness and it's do people deliver or not, you got to be a little careful on that. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I think if we were to look forward from here, and if Starbucks and Walmart and Mastercard and other companies can show that the goals they've laid out they're living up to, then I think we negate this conversation. Trying to gain credibility before you demonstrate results is not going to change the way people think about big business. And I think that's you're going to lead with your heart and your mind. You know, David, I've said for a long time now in our company that when I was a young man getting into business school, I was told that what you needed to have was your IQ, you know, your intelligence quotient. And somewhere along the line, I learned that you're supposed to have EQ, which is to manage through difficult circumstances, your emotional quotient. And I keep saying we need to have DQ, which is your decency quotient. And that is to empower everybody in the company to feel that they are welcomed here, that this is where they belong, that they have a level playing field, and I'm going to give them every opportunity to feel the power of my hand on their back and not in their face. And that's a statement, but to demonstrate the delivery of that statement requires tangible things to be done for employees, but also for the society we work in, because you know, if society thrives, we thrive. And I think that's the common interest paradigm that we're all trying to apply. So I could give you many examples of what we're trying to do in that space, but it's all about making sure you're measurable and you deliver. One example I will give you, back in 2014, we made a commitment as a company that we would reach 500 million people around the world and bring them into the financial mainstream by helping them to get an identity and get access to some kind of an account on a cloud, in a phone, with your fingerprint on a card somewhere to save money, transact money, maybe therefore use that to get access to credit and insurance at a reasonable price with partners. We said we'd do that by 2020. We've done it. It's measured. The IMF and the World Bank are our biggest supporters on this. And now we've gone forward and said, guess what? Having done this, by 2025, we will reach 1 billion in total, of which 50 million will be micro SMEs and 25 million will be women entrepreneurs. Again, it's a measurable goal. We'll be tracked to it. And if you don't deliver, there are consequences. And I think that's the point that we're all trying to make.
Well, what are the consequences?
Well, there are two or three. The first one is exactly down to your line of compensation. So into our compensation plans for next year for the senior management team, the EVPs and above, of which there are about 200 in our company, will be put very specific goals on all the elements of inclusion. So inclusion for our people, inclusion in the marketplace, and inclusion in society. They get measured and evaluated on them for their annual plan, and a percentage of their comp will connect to that. But even more than that, their entire career development, their ability to prosper in our company and be a part of our company's culture will be very dependent upon how they conduct themselves as leaders in this. Every one of them has an employee engagement survey on which they track and measure. The people who work for you report about how you're doing in their perception on these different aspects. Those are seen by everybody else. It's an open survey. There are no secrets. This makes it, kind of shine the light on an individual's behavior.
David, let me build a little bit on Ajay's comments about consequences. Think about the world we are in today. We're going through a global pandemic. People have adapted their personal lives, their professional lives. We've sheltered at home. Many of us working from home. Some of us in office. Parents are having to homeschool their children. Dramatic disruption. Part of that now has created millions and millions of people who are now out of work as we work to get through this. So they're out of work and there's food insecurity. They're worried about caring for their children. In addition to that, we've got, social unrest, racial injustice, inequities has amplified, this emotion in society today. In addition, environmental sustainability. We have fires burning on the West Coast. We have hurricanes hitting the Gulf Coast. And we're going through one of the most divisive elections this country has ever seen. And so that's the scenario. Now, the consequences, if businesses don't step in and help contribute to address societal issues, you wonder what kind of country do we live in and what kind of environment does it make for a business to run a healthy business. So this concept, maybe this concept that Milton Friedman espoused 50 years ago, that the sole purpose of the business's responsibility to society was to maximize profit, I think is completely wrong. Businesses have to pursue a purpose that goes beyond profit. Businesses have to get involved to partner with government officials and citizens to help make improvements in our planet. Environmental sustainability will not get addressed unless we have businesses partnering with governments and getting citizens involved to change the way we treat this planet. Likewise, the civil unrest that we see will not be addressed unless we work together, with elected officials, citizens, to figure out how can we create, a pathway to opportunity for all people. How can we create more equity and inclusion in this society? And so, my personal view is the consequences are significant. That it is time. Businesses have had corporate social responsibility for many years, but I think this is a time where we really have to think about elevating, caring for our planet, taking care of people in society at the same level we focus on the for-profit piece of our business. And at Starbucks, we call that being profit positive, planet positive, and people positive. And that's where I think businesses are going over the next decade.
Well, that's a pretty. I mean, listen, Kevin, we came in this year. Sorry, Ajay, you go ahead. Yeah.
Fit what Kevin is saying. One side of the triangle is one versus many. That's the whole issue of inclusion, racial, economic, ethnicity, gender. Depending on which country you're in, that has different meanings, to the point that Judith made so eloquently when she was speaking. The second side of the triangle is humanity versus nature. That's our climate, ecology, and the like. The problem is two sides of a triangle cannot stay unless the bottom keeps them up. And the bottom, unfortunately, is the trade-off between long-termism and short-termism. That's not just true for corporations, it's true for politicians as well. There is no incentive for a mayor of a city to invest in underground rail transit, which will take 10 years to make, which will be 6 years after her or his mayoral term is over for the second time. And that's the problem. And so they go for a bus rapid transit system, which they can show in 2 years, but actually doesn't solve the problem. So the issue in society, as it is for companies, as it is for everybody else, is the three sides of this triangle. We need to focus on those. And if you can make society thrive, businesses thrive. That's the point that Kevin was just making.
But I listen to both of you, and obviously I want to hear Judith as well on this in a minute. But Ajay, coming into this year, we had this statement from the Business Roundtable challenging at least the shareholder primacy, which in and of itself seemed to be a fairly significant statement and one we spent a lot of time talking about. That was before we entered the pandemic, before this current moment that we're in. But when I listen to the two of you talk, it sounds like you're talking about a complete and seminal change in the way corporations act in this country and in this world, and a change in capitalism. I mean, Kevin, you're shaking your head. It's still sometimes hard for people to really get their head around that that really is going to take place.
Yeah, but the thing is, and this is the point he was making, don't try and rebrand capitalism into some new form of capitalism. That makes it sound like the whole of capitalism doesn't work. The fact is it works. It's done a lot, but it hasn't done everything we want. And we need to intervene, which is the point that Kevin was making, forcefully to ensure that consequences which otherwise will come at us if we don't intervene, we've got to change that direction. That direction is to bring in this perspective that there's more to it than just the profits you make every month, every quarter, and every year. That you can actually bring meaning to the words of doing well by doing good. These are not contradictory words. You can do that.
Right.
I think that's what we're making.
Kevin, how are we going to measure that? You know, I think of myself on TV every day talking about your earnings, talking about your long-term plans. We measure you by your financial results. We measure Walmart by its financial results. When are we going to get the tools to adequately measure the progress you're making that conceivably you're saying a lot of constituencies care a lot about that aren't your shareholders necessarily, or maybe are as well?
Well, they are as well. But let me call this stakeholder capitalism, David, and let me give you two examples of how these three things, planet, people, and profit, can work in harmony. Okay, here we are in the global pandemic. It was late March, and we had to make a decision in the United States. We had to close all of our stores with the exception of drive-thrus. Why did we do that? We did that because we prioritized the health and well-being of our Starbucks partners and the customers we serve. We wanted to partner with local health officials to contain and mitigate the spread of the virus, and we wanted to show up in a positive and responsible way in every community we're a part of. In making that decision, we decided that we were going to pay our partners whether they came to work or not. We decided to give them economic certainty. And that came at a big price tag, but we believed that was the right thing to do, to put people ahead of profit at a time where it mattered. And values are going to be tested at times of adversity. That was a time of adversity, and we said, no, we're going to take care of our partners. Economic certainty. We did no involuntary layoffs or furloughs. We paid everyone, and we said, we're going to get through this together. Now, you roll forward, and for shareholders, they're saying, well, that's a big price tag, but look at what happened. By doing that, we built trust. We were transparent with our shareholders on what that would cost and why we were doing it, transparent with our partners. When we started to reopen stores, partners rise to the occasion. And so as they've reopened stores, they're driving that business recovery. Our customer connection scores are at an all-time high. Our partner engagement scores are at an all-time high. And that investment will pay dividends for the company for decades to come. Second example, we figured out through our agronomy research how to help coffee farmers get a 5 to 10 times yield improvement in their crops. Now think about it. We buy coffee from 350,000 or more different farms, coffee farms around the world. Many of these are family-run farms. Now, if your family runs a coffee farm and you can get a 5 to 10x improvement in the yield, you just improved your economic situation by 5 to 10x for your family. That is a great thing to do for society and for those coffee farmers. But it also helps us from an environmental sustainability standpoint. That means we now have more coffee to serve a growing coffee market without additional deforestation. So we reduce the carbon footprint, we bring economic prosperity to coffee farmers, and we bring high quality coffee to Starbucks. These things can work in harmony. Stakeholder capitalism is the future.
Judith, I want to get you in here. And, you know, I would quickly interject. I did 2 documentaries through the years on Walmart. And remember well Sam Walton. I wonder how he would react to some of the things we've heard here. And I'm just curious to your thoughts. And of course, what the new Walmart, so to speak, is doing and how you react to what you've just heard from Ajay and Kevin.
I'm smiling. You know, we were founded in 1962. by Salmon. I've seen the documentaries, David. At the heart of what we do is the culture, and culture is behaviors at scale. So the behaviors that you have as an organization, and as I listen to this conversation, what I would say is that you're not going to get 3 more passionate people on a call like this talking about why this is the right thing to do. I think for all of us, it's really obvious. We can see this connection by doing the right thing for our associates, doing the right things for our customers, creating financial inclusion, which we do in India through PhonePe, all of the things that we do, we can see the benefits of it. What we need to do as organizations is help others understand that as well as do what we do. And I think one of the things that Sam did well, Sam Walton, was talk about how the good of Walmart can be spread beyond what we do to convene others as well. So when I think about this space, and I think about, I'll take one element of it, which is planet. And I think about sustainability. And I watch how we've moved from being a business who cared about sustainability to being a business who is now caring about being a regenerative business. The real power that we have when we make statements like taking 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases out of the environment, we can't do that on our own. And I think this conversation has to be about and. We need others with us to be able to do that. So we can convene 2,500 suppliers to join with us. We can work with the Kevins and the Ajays and other business leaders and make sure that we can make a difference here. But ultimately, the whole reason for being for companies and for businesses has been highlighted to say it has to be about who you are, not just what you do. And ultimately, customers for us will choose who they shop with and how they shop, not just on what we offer them, the prices that we have, but also on how we care about our people, how we care about them, and the impact and the difference we make in our communities. So one of the biggest parts in this for me is not only educating investors that this is an and, not an or. That this is not a straight linear choice to do one thing or another. This is actually working out how you bring companies like ours with true scale to actually show that combining all of these elements, I love RJ's triangle, together, create a better business. And by doing that, and you have to show people, not tell them, and by doing that, ultimately, returns will be improved in the long term. Now, you have to make short-term decisions, and we made those just as Starbucks did. We said at the center of this is our associates and the center is our customers. And we'll worry about the P&L and we'll worry about everything else later. Let's just do the right thing. And we kept our stores open because we needed to. But we didn't flinch from extending leave for people or any of those kind of things. So I think it comes right down to who you are and not accepting that you have to make trade-offs. That you can do both things and you can do them at scale.
But, Judith, I mean, as you are, Ajay, I'll get to you in one moment. I just want to follow up if I can. You are an incredibly powerful company and an important one. As I said, one of the, if not the largest single employers in the country here, and obviously very large around the world. You still have to balance how much you pay people. You still have to balance how many benefits you give to people. You are still a corporation, by the way, that gets criticized for not paying enough, for having too many workers. I think it was 347,000 who still aren't getting paid sick leave. Maybe that's changed. I mean, how do you respond to those and say, well, there's plenty more you could be doing if you want to make good on some of those pledges?
So we increased wages by 50% over the last 5 years. So we made huge moves for people over that time. We introduced training and education that had never been done before, and we introduced opportunities for people to promote and get to manager levels through the organization in ways we hadn't been able to. So we provide something that not many people can do, which is true access to opportunity. And because of our scale, not just in the US, but around the world, we can really do that. Now, at the end of the day, we saw huge increases in productivity as we increased wages. There is a balance as to what you need to do, where and when, but things aren't mutually exclusive. And that's why we keep coming back to taking care of our associates, improving our benefits, extending our medical leave, making sure that people can have access to time off when they need it, maternity care, paternity care, adoption care. All of those things we have put in place over the last 5 years, and we'll continue to find out which are the ways that matter most to our associates every day as well. And this is not just for the US. This is in every market in which we operate, which is one of the reasons we have given so many thank yous and thank you bonuses out this year as we've gone through the pandemic as well, to recognize our amazing associates and the frontline work that they're doing every day in the stores and the DCs.
Ajay, I got in the way of you there, so feel free, please, to tell us.
I was adding to what both of them were saying. You would ask a specific question about the metrics, and then will we have the metrics to get clarity around this. There's an interesting piece of work going on with the World Economic Forum and the International Business Council, chaired by Brian Moynihan, and I'm a part of that work, where we're creating a set of metrics that will allow all companies to publish against those, and that will allow the investor community to see how we are doing on these ESG goals. Now, it's complicated. There are sectoral issues between them. My general view in life is let's move the ball forward, get the first lot measured and out there so that the light shines on them, and then let's keep improving from there. I think that's an effort that we should all try and align behind to get this going. That's one part of it. The other part of it, which I wanted to bring out, was the idea of partnerships and getting people together that Judith talked about. Take climate, for example. In the midst of this entire COVID situation, back to those people, market, society, can you influence the three? I'm talking about society for a minute. We launched what's called the Priceless Planet Coalition. What we're doing is we're saying we're going to plant 100 billion trees by educating our consumers who spend as to what the carbon footprint impact of their spending is by using an index from Standard & Poor's. And we use that to tell them, well, you could set a target for what you'd like your family's footprint to be this month. We'll send you a text message, and if you can change your pattern, we'll plant trees for you. So you take the tube instead of a cab in London, we'll plant a tree for you. You can measure how many trees your family planted. So it's a way of getting the consumer through a coalition of merchants and banking institutions involved with the idea that planting trees is something they can measure and deliver as compared to carbon offsets and carbon pricing that they can't get their arms around. And I think this idea of taking what we do and creating coalitions of the willing and standing up and setting an example is really important.
Ajay, well, everybody, I would be remiss if I didn't spend a little time here on just the current environment, given it's not often that I get three CEOs who have sort of the lens that you do on what's going on in the world. Kevin, you went through a rather depressing litany of things that we're facing right now. Obviously, unfortunately, we're still in the midst of the pandemic. Things in Europe are getting worse. Things here in the United States, frankly, are not much better, with 62,000, I think, or so new COVID cases yesterday. Thankfully, hospitalization rates are lower than they were in the spring. What are you seeing? Kevin, I guess I'll start with you, but I'd love to get everybody here. In terms of your business, what are your expectations from what you're seeing from your customer base and anything else you might be able to tell us in terms of how you're dealing with the pandemic and how you're treating your employees and additional health benefits perhaps that you're providing as well?
Yeah, I'd say, throughout this journey that started earlier this year in China, and I was involved in early January and had an opportunity to really, with Belinda Wong and her team in China, to really understand the implications of this pandemic. And it was in China we actually developed the store protocols that we then propagated to the U.S. and adapted and around the world. And the approach we've taken is as we close stores and reopen stores with these new store protocols, we continue to prioritize the safety and health and well-being of our partners and customers. We continue to partner with health officials to contain the virus, and we continue to show up in a positive way in the communities we serve. But we have fundamentally transformed our operational capabilities to be able to monitor and adapt in every market around the world. Now, what does that mean? That means if we see the virus is spread is increasing in a certain city or a certain community, we can dial back and tighten up the experiences we offer in our stores. For example, we can say, oh, it's drive-through only or contactless pickup only. If the curve is flattening, we can turn the dial up slightly. And in many of our stores in the U.S., for example, we have limited seating where there's social distancing, and everyone wears masks in our stores. And so we figured out how to adapt those store protocols based on what's happening in that market. One of the things that's helped us is we developed some artificial intelligence tools that basically take daily feeds of the spread of COVID. In the US, it's by county. In China, it's by city, for example. It looks at customer behavior and customer sentiment. It looks at our partner sentiment, and it will recommend to a store manager which protocol they ought to use. And so those tools inform them, but it's the store managers and our district managers who make the actual decision of what to do in our stores. So every store making decisions on what's right for them, and that approach is working. So, we're in this situation, I believe, until there's a vaccine or more therapeutics. We're going to monitor and adapt in every, all of the 32,000 stores we operate in over 80 markets around the world, and we've now operationalized that, and that approach is working well. And we expect we're going to be, in this approach or in this model until there's a vaccine available at scale.
Judith, similar question to you. I mean, anyone who follows business news knows Walmart's business has actually done extraordinarily well during this period. And your digital business has obviously helped fuel that and has changed, it would seem, fairly dramatically. What are you seeing, both not just here in the US, obviously, but more around the world is under your leadership? And how much is going to stay with us in terms of behaviors, both amongst your customers, but also, I wonder, even amongst your employees, including senior leadership, in terms of having to get on a plane when you can or feel comfortable doing so?
Oh my goodness, there's so many different aspects of this that you can talk to about how the business has changed. If you'd asked me, like Kevin, I spent time in China at the beginning of the year. It is, we took all of our protocols for them. We then adapted them around the world. So we took that learning. So metering people into stores, keeping people safe, plexiglass, all of those things. So how we operate a store, how we operate a DC as well, because we shouldn't forget them, has changed. I think in addition, how we all work remotely has changed. And some of us were just chatting. Learning how to work remotely, to be present when you can't be present, is an incredibly challenging skill that many of us have learned, because we're used to being able to travel, to be with people, to hold, kind of big annual conferences. None of that is possible. So we've learned to operate in different ways. We've also seen how people shop differently as well. And I could, regale you for hours about how sales of deodorant have gone down, but sales of tops, not bottoms, have gone up. But probably the most interesting part is actually how people are shopping, because we already saw this shift to omnichannel around the world. The UK was our most developed market for that anywhere, been operating in this way for almost 20 years. But that moved around the world. In the US, we'd set foundations for it. In Mexico, we saw omnichannel, people picking up and having delivery of groceries expand in a way that I've never seen anything accelerate quite so fast. We stood it up from scratch in Central America. In India, we spread our grocery deliveries to more cities. So that switch of consumer behavior to wanting to pick up, to wanting to have something delivered to them, is the one that I think we've seen the single biggest acceleration in. And the question is how much of it is going to stick. My own view is once people have seen that convenience, whilst there will always be a need for stores, whether it be going to your Starbucks store or whether it be going to your Walmart or your Bodega or whatever we call ourselves in different markets, people will also want choice. And David, I think that is the thing that we are going to see a step change in and in customer behavior about whatever service industry you are in. And I think the more that companies can step up to recognize that and to work to have innovation and technology that supports that to make it efficient and seamless, that's going to be important. You asked about senior leadership and what changes for them. That's part of it. you have to actually let go of the past to be able to build the future. And some of those things that some of us, I've been at the company 25 years, I grew up believing, you have to be able to move on from. And we've seen people, and I'm sure that's true for everybody, work at a pace I've never seen in agile ways, breaking down silos. If we can take one piece of leadership forward, that ability to work in that way and achieve under pressure incredible things will be the thing that I think there is a generation coming behind the three of us that have had a masterclass in leadership in 8 months that it took me 25 years to learn. And I think that's going to be really interesting to watch as well.
Ajay, do you agree?
Yes, look, we see the data flowing through our rails, right? So we very early in the system defined that we'd run the company for 4 stages through this. The first one was containment, and that was the free fall of March and April. And then was what we call stabilization, which is a polite way for the bottom being reached, which is really the April, May, June period. And then what we call normalization, which is not really normal, but it is, in a sense, you don't have cross-border travel, you don't have mass entertainment events, but you do have people beginning to get a life again, going out for dining in some places, and expenditure going, as Judith said, beyond just the idea of deodorant going down and athletic wear going up. And then the real growth phase to us is post-vaccine and therapeutic availability. So really, we're talking about the second part of next year before we get back to a pre-COVID kind of time. Now, if you look at normalization in these phases, say contactless payments are now 40+% of our total volume. That was much lower pre the pandemic. The United States was the lowest on that. It's now progressing very rapidly. Or take digital of ordering, e-commerce, which in the US used to be 8 to 9% of retail spend pre-COVID. It's now running at 18%. Now, your question of whether it will stay there or go back, the only way I can answer that well, beyond what Judith said, is that if you look at the countries where more normalization has progressed, more countries are on that pathway, you will find that things like e-commerce are running at about 50% higher than what they were pre-COVID, which means while they may have doubled during the midst of the crisis, they've lost some of that, but they're still much different and much more important to a consumer than they used to be pre-COVID. And so that's showing a degree of sticky behavior on the side of that change in the marketplace. Now, our entire expense profile is run for those 4 stages. So if you are operating at normalization, we're investing more in certain strategic projects than if you were in containment. And these are not linear, things are moving back and forth. The second part of this is the question about your employees and people during this. Yes, we committed to them that there would be no layoffs in this period, so they could focus on their families and their clients. But we also did 2 interesting things. And one was, in the midst of it, we announced that we would give everybody paternity and maternity leave of equal amounts fully paid with no no pro rata for the time they were out. So you're going to get 16 weeks of paid leave, both if you're the father, the male partner, or the female partner in the household. And then the second thing we announced connected to that was that, not just with health benefits, but with your retirement benefits, if you save 6% into a 401k equivalent, in the US it's a 401k, elsewhere it's other plans, if you put in 6%, we'll put in 10, which means you'll get 16. And if you do the math on that, a young person joining our company after a graduate degree who gets about $55,000 a year could retire when let's say they get to 250, good chance of getting there. If you save 16% a month, you can get the equivalent of a defined benefit plan after you retire, even though what you have is a defined contribution plan. We did that in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of the challenges around expenses. So I think all 3 of us are showing you that we are willing to be measured by what we are doing, not just by what we are saying.
Ajay, quickly, give me a sense, though. We talk a lot about what seems to be 2 different economies almost. One in part reflected by the success of Walmart and big companies, so many technology companies that are benefiting from the acceleration of digitization. But the other economy, the small and medium-sized businesses that are struggling, restaurants, for example. I mean, you have great insight there. What are you seeing and what are you going to expect to see as we head into the colder weather in particular?
So it's very clear that there is a K-shaped recovery going on. I mean, Walmart sees it in the people who come shop there. They have an amazing insight into that. But if you just think about what you just said, in the beginning, in that containment phase, the first phase we had, we have a way of measuring how many small businesses have had no electronic payment transaction in the next 30 days. And that was 60% was the number in the midst of containment, which meant that 60% of small businesses were effectively shut. We're now running that number about 20 odd percent, which means that about a fifth of small businesses have just closed. They're gone. There's a study in New York City that says that 1/3 of New York City's small businesses are unlikely to reopen. And that, by the way, is 80% plus of New York City's employment comes from small businesses. So I would tell you that while the government's done a pretty decent job on fiscal and monetary stimulus in the first few months, the fact is that the second shoe may yet drop in the form of what happens going forward from here. Now that PPP money and the unemployment money is beginning to run out, I think there is a real challenge here, not just the weather for restaurants, it's all the rest of the fiscal stimulus. And that's why I said we need another fiscal stimulus. We need it aimed at the people who need the most help, which is small businesses and those who are facing unemployment because of that. And by the way, the people getting impacted the most happen to be women and people of color, because that's the way the small business shakeout is happening. So we've got a whole societal issue here as well, David, that is underlying this challenge.
Yeah. Judith, you also have insight into small and medium-sized businesses. I know you've made some efforts there as well. I mean, Walmart's a giant company, but many of the companies you're buying product from are not. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, Ajay, I couldn't have put it better myself in terms of what is needed in terms of stimulus here for small businesses, because we need small businesses to be successful and we need them to come through this as well from an employment perspective, but just for the general economy. We have a couple of different things that we're doing. One is we're trying to get businesses who supply us, we're extending payment terms for them where they need it. We're bringing them onto our e-commerce platforms in both in India and in the US as fast as we possibly can. We've made those processes much easier for people to do. We also operate Sam's Clubs as well, both in Mexico and in the US and in China. And we're serving small business members there. We've extended services to them. We've set up business advisory services. We've tried to find different ways to extend terms for them so that they can continue to survive. But ultimately, we know we're healthy if we've got a good, healthy and diverse supplier base. We also ran the US manufacturing call recently as well, which was for all small businesses who thought that they had a product that they could sell in Walmart to come forward. It was a phenomenal event. And everybody that came forward is going to have a chance to put their item onto walmart.com and see what the customer reaction is to that as well. So we're trying to stimulate this on both ends. We're trying to make sure that we take care of the people who we do business with already, but we're trying to find new business as well. And as Ajay said, particularly women-owned, minority-owned businesses that we can bring forward and actually shine a light on and give them a chance in a much constricted world.
In the 10 minutes or so that we have left, I did want to get to a couple of the questions that we've gotten as well from participants in today's session. And Kevin, let me come to you on this because you spent a lot of time during this course of this speaking about the changes in capitalism, for lack of a better term. We have a question that asks, is stakeholder capitalism model anti-democratic? Why should social issues be reliant upon corporate decisions? And it does appear that corporations have taken the lead in ways that perhaps our government has failed to. How do you see that evolving?
Well, the way I think about this is, look, we're all part of society. And I think as citizens, as businesses, as elected officials, when we unite behind common cause, we get things done. And stakeholder capitalism to me is businesses that their purpose goes beyond the pursuit of profit, where they're going to take care of all stakeholders. Those stakeholders include our partners. So the degree to which we create a great environment for Starbucks partners to work and contribute and grow, the fact we give them access to a college education in our partnership with Arizona State University, that creates great opportunity in society. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. I think the question said, do businesses have to lead in that? I think businesses have to be involved in it. And each business has to decide what is appropriate for them. And so when we think about environmental sustainability at Starbucks, look, we measure our climate we think about climate, water, and waste. We measure our carbon footprint. We look at how much waste we generate. We understand how much water we consume in the processing of coffee and creating our business. And we just find ways to reduce that. That's a positive thing. That's aligned with what we believe citizens want. And our customers, we know our customers want that. We know our partners want that. And I think partnering with government to do those things is important. And if you don't get businesses involved and businesses don't step up to that, I think that's a missing element for solving some of these big social problems.
But Kevin, particularly on the subject of climate change, for example, we've had a current administration that has not done much of anything. In fact, continue to sort of dispute the science of it. Does that make what you're doing as a corporation does it spotlight it more in a sense? There's a different administration that responds differently to that challenge. Does it take the weight off of what you're doing?
Well, look, the way I think about this is, we're going to do what's right for Starbucks when it comes to our planet positive agenda, independent of what administration is in the White House and who our elected officials are. Elections, the democratic process says that, as citizens, each one of us gets to fulfill our civic responsibility by voting and deciding who we want to serve in our offices. As business leaders, I have to decide what is the right thing for Starbucks to do when it comes to environmental sustainability. And that's exactly what we've done. And I believe by doing that and by, convening others and being part of the coalition of the willing, as Ajay said earlier, is what creates these movements. And I think that there's great energy across much of society to do what we can to improve the sustainability of our planet. And we're going to participate in that. It's the right thing for Starbucks. It's the right thing for our partners. It's the right thing for customers. And I think it helps society. And so every business, I think, has to make their own decisions around what do they believe is right for their business. But I really think that this model of corporate social responsibility, where oftentimes it's viewed as this sidecar on the engine of profit, needs to change, where you pick one or two things. Here's what we're going to do to elevate our planet positive agenda. Here's what we're going to do to elevate our people positive agenda. These are the right things for Starbucks that are supported by our profit positive agenda. And by doing that, we can serve all stakeholders.
Judith, you operate in markets around the world. Some of those have been ahead of us when it comes to responding to some of the very things that Kevin is talking about. I mean, are we in the United States sort of importing some of these ideas when it comes to ESG, where, for example, Europe has been ahead of us, it would seem, in many of their, at least, corporations?
Yeah, so we take the best practice from around the world, irrespective of whether it's being mandated or not. And clearly Europe has. So our UK business is doing some extraordinary work, particularly in the use of plastics, the circular economy, trialing refills in stores, doing some things like that. But I think every market are doing different things, and we're just about to move to no carrier bags, no sacks for shopping in Mexico, for example, in the new year. So we're doing different things. Like Kevin said, you've got to do what's right for your company in the market in which you operate, and that is different around the world. We're actually seeing some great innovation coming out of India. and seeing how plastic's being used there, for example, in packaging, because we're an e-commerce company fundamentally delivering to people's doors, have been replaced using cardboards, using different kinds of structures of packaging, which we're now using, and we're going to use in our Canada business, and we're going to use in other businesses as well. So I think one of the things we have to be able to do is to learn from each other. And whilst Europe is more advanced, I think it is less to do with just what governments say or institutions say. It is about what we think is the right thing to do. And again, at our scale, we recognize that working with our suppliers, we can make a difference in the footprint around the world. And we committed recently, a bit like everybody else in the middle of a pandemic, recommitting to this agenda, which was to say that we will be zero emissions without carbon offsets globally, everywhere we operate, by 2040. That is a very significant commitment, and it is going to take every piece of our business and every piece of best practice we've got, from refrigerants to electric trucks to you name it, to get us there, but we'll measure and manage it at every step along the way.
Yeah, that is quite an undertaking, given it's only 19 years away. Ajay, our panel was on culture, which we've talked a lot about, and also leadership, which perhaps we haven't talked quite as much about, although it's been a part of it. I wonder if you could just reflect for me as we kind of wrap up here. You're stepping down as CEO in a few months. How do you view the role of leadership from when you started and as to when you sort of make your exit, at least as CEO right now?
Yeah, look, I think that a leader's job is to provide the right framework for the people of that company to be inspired to do the right thing. That finally is what your culture is. Your culture is the glue that holds the company together. And as Judith said, to do so at scale, because otherwise it's not replicable. And that culture, what we're trying to build, has to get into people. So what my view of a leader is, have a sense of urgency about what you think is important for the company. State clearly what that is. Don't ever get tired of repeating it 1,000 times. Make sure you've got simple metrics to enable progress to be measured on those things. Walk around and encourage people who are making real progress, but also walk around and help the others who aren't making enough progress, because the job is to take the whole lot with you. And if you can do that well, and then you can celebrate the success and kind of get out of the way of people who are trying to do the right thing by creating the framework for them to get to this scalable place, that's a great place to be. And when I look back on my 11 years here, the thing that gives me the most pride, I think, is that we've got a culture of decency, of people wanting to make a difference. We want to win, don't get me wrong. This company wants to win. Our shareholder return shows that. Our way of approving and approaching clients shows that. We want to win, but we want to win the right way. And one of the ways that we call the right way is the willingness to do, as I said, do well by doing good. And that cuts across all the things we've been discussing right now. So leadership and culture is the amorphous terms. They don't have to be quantified in some way. You have to live them. There has to be a heart and mind that comes to work to do that every day. That's what I believe in. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Well, we appreciate your sharing that thought with us. And I want to thank everybody as we wrap up here. Kevin, Judith, Ajay, thank you all for a great conversation. And thanks to all who participated and watched as well. I'm David Faber, and I'll see you soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.